And before we start, I have something to read out to you. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become a part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human rights and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. Thank you. Okay, so once again, welcome members, speakers, members of the public, officers, and people watching on the webcast. My name is Ian Hadley, I'm the chairman for the evening. On my left, I have Councillor Heather Brady as my vice chairman. On my right, I have Graham Courtney, planning officer, Laura Kerman from Domestic Services, and Becky, who's working the buttons and levers for our technology. Okay, so more further ado, we go straight in to advice for public speakers and attending the council planning. Has everybody been advised?
We've received the papers.
They have. Item 3, apologies for absence.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Bedford, Councillor Burrows and Councillor Stalker.
Councillor?
Can I add to Councillor Janet Whitehouse to that, please?
Okay. Okay, that's complete, is it? Fine, thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. Anybody? No? Fine. Item 5, the minutes of the last meeting. I have a point to raise, which is on page 21, condition 36. Now, I know the people of Staple Abbots are jolly fine people, but I don't think they should take precedent when it comes to priority housing of those from Fifield in a new group of houses being built in Fifield. Thank you, Graham.
Yep, so apologies, that was my mistake. Luckily, the decision notice hasn't yet been issued because it is subject to a legal agreement, so I'll have that amended immediately.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else with comments on the minutes from the last meeting? Thank you. Any other business? No? Good. Planning policy briefing note. I take that we note it, as we normally do. Site visits. Anybody recommended a site visit? Take it, no site visits. Okay, so we go on to the planning applications. The first one being EPF 2364/19, the site adjacent to Great Knotts, Norton Road. I think Kumar is taking that one on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm you can all hear me?
Yeah.
Good evening, members. Could everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Item number 9, bearing reference EPF 2364/19. It's also a SAC held in abeyance case. The case has been deferred for this committee decision owing to objections from Morton, Bobbingworth and the Lavers Parish Council and 3 other non-councillor related residents. The objections are summarised on page 29 of the published agenda. Moving on, the application site comprises a 2-storey timber framed barn, including a separate outbuilding with associated hard standings located to the north of Morton Road in Bobbingworth. So this is the application site, which is outlined in this almost purple colour, and the blue line boundaries also denote the applicant's wider ownership. The outbuilding and the main barn, which is the subject, obviously, this planning application, and also the access is shown here, the access track rather, with the main access onto Morton Road. Morton Road runs to the south of the site here. These are just a couple of images of obviously the barn building presently on site, and this is obviously the access track leading off Morton Road. These are properties Highfield and Fairmead, I believe, that sit opposite to the main access. Also, members should be aware of there are a couple of relevant planning constraints. The site's actually located in the Metropolitan Greenbelt, and also there is a national grid assets in the form of a high pressure gas pipeline running to the north and west of the site, as shown by my laser pen here. So the application seeks planning permission to convert the existing 2-storey barn to provide a single family dwelling house and accommodate 3 bedrooms with ancillary office and workshop areas. So this is the existing elevations to the actual current barn itself. It's fairly rudimentary in terms of its design, so typical of obviously a barn building. These are the existing floor plans where there are large storage areas and a workshop area with further stores, etc., and office areas on the first floor, and obviously roof storage within its roof. So the application seeks planning permission to provide the single family dwelling house, which will accommodate 3 bedrooms with ancillary office and workshop areas. So just simply looking at these floor plans, the ground area obviously accommodates the living, dining, the day accommodation effectively, and a workshop space or area is also included. And we have bedroom accommodation, obviously, at first floor with office and storage space on part of the wing to the building, and also the roof storage retained within its roof. So in terms of basically the main planning issues are set out on page 30 of the agenda. I won't repeat those, and they're quite clearly set out there, but just running through in terms of the principle of reuse of the barn for residential purposes. Officers consider the proposals constitute an exception under paragraph 150, part D of the NPPF, and likewise local plan policies, and therefore is not an inappropriate form of development in the Greenbelt. In terms of design and appearance, the alterations and additions to the existing form of barn are minor in both their scale and nature, and would largely retain the character of the original building as built. The internal accommodation is generous and well laid out, and would achieve the high standards expected of new residential development. There will be no adverse impact on existing neighbouring amenities, given the relative location and its proximity to those. The existing means of access, turn areas for cars, including space for parking, is considered acceptable as well, although additional information in terms of hard surfacing and demarcation straight treatment of boundaries will be required to ensure any modifications are in keeping with the countryside setting. There are no highway safety or operational issues that would arise as a result of development proposals, as confirmed by 6 highways. With regards to the effects of development on the SAC, a special area of conservation, the applicant is committed to making contributions to mitigating air pollution effects of the development through section 106. Further measures including electrical vehicle charging points and homework are also recommended to be included by the officers. Overall, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions indicated on pages 34 to 38, including securing section 106 to secure the SAC-related financial contributions. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Speakers, we only have one speaker on this one. That's Mr. Nick Davey, who is the applicant's agent. So Nick, you have, turn the microphone on, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Thank you. So my name is Nick Davey. I'm here tonight representing the applicant who is sitting to my right, Mrs. Bates, who owns the barn and an adjacent campsite. The barn was erected over 20 years ago, but is now separated from the original agricultural holding and has been unused for a number of years. Mrs. Bates first made an application in April 2008 to convert it into a dwelling for herself, but the proposal got caught up in issues relating to the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation. She went to appeal, probably inadvisable at the time, And although the inspector found the proposal was an appropriate form of development and was happy to grant consent, he couldn't do so because there were no SAC mitigation measures in place at the time, and that was the only ground of refusal. So the application was resubmitted in October 2019, and it's taken this long to get to committee. Your officers confirm the building is substantial and permanent. No extensions are proposed. The design retains the agricultural feel of the building, and associated external activity will not harm the openness of the greenbelt. Officers also confirm the building will provide an appropriate residential environment. No harm will befall any neighbour, and there's an appropriate means of access and parking provision. Any other outstanding matters can be dealt with by condition. Your officers confirm the proposal complies with all relevant national and local policies, and that it is an appropriate and sustainable form of development in the Green Belt. SAC mitigation can be secured by a Section 106 agreement which has been signed and already lodged with the Council. There have been 4 objections. Your officers have dealt with the Greenbelt issues. On the other matters, the proposal will not set a precedent for any other barn conversions. They all have to be considered on their merits, nor does it set any precedent for the expansion of the campsite. The Highway Authority is happy with access and is happy with parking and access. And for clarification, Mrs Bates does own the full length of the access drive out to Moreton Road. The Parish Council supports the proposal, but has asked for occupation of the barn to be linked to the campsite. But as your officers point out, there's no planning, statutory, legal or other basis that would require that or justify that. The proposal's taken over 4 years to get to this stage, and Mrs Bates is currently living in a temporary accommodation and has been waiting for a long time to create a new house for herself. So I hope that members can agree with the officer recommendation and grant consent today. And if you have any questions, be happy to help.
Thank you, Mr Daly. Okay, members, who would like to speak first? Normally the ward member does, which is me, but I'm not going to speak first on this occasion. Any members? Vice Chairman, what would you like to say?
Okay. To me, this doesn't look like an agricultural barn that you would build 20 years ago in this modern day and age for agricultural machinery, etc. It was built on a very small holding, as we're told, and it's now been, and it was, as long as it carried on for agricultural use, which I gather there was very little of that all the way through its history. It's now been split away from its land, so it has no chance of being used for any sort of agricultural use at all. But obviously it has now been there some 23 years. So, it's very difficult to oppose, but obviously it looks very like what will become a very nice looking house without anything having to be done to it except put a few windows in. So I can't see how we can oppose this on planning grounds and win at appeal. But it nevertheless upsets me that I see the Greenbelt being hived off into little sections, people building barns, and almost immediately, if you look at the planning history here, seeking to live in this barn some 5 years later or 6 years later, and I think possibly even before that. So can I just state publicly here that I would like the planning department here, when they get plans such as this in the future, to please be very, very sure that any barns that they give permission to really honestly have a proper agricultural setup with them that justifies their construction, please, because we're getting these one after the other, and unfortunately you can just separate it from the land some few years later, 4 years later, 10 years later, whatever it is, and seek to turn it into a much cheaper house, and a house that has permission there that wouldn't have had permission if you went into it from a house in the very beginning. So I just would like to put this down on record, please, for planning officers to look more thoroughly into the evidence sometimes that they're given. I'm not talking about this one precisely. This is something separate. I'm just talking in general could they please look very deeply into the information that they're given when people are seeking a big barn on a small piece of land. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate your comments. I think I agree with you. But what we have in front of us, I see no reason to object to this in any way, shape or form. We have a comment down there from Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with an amount of what Councillor Brady said. I did actually go and look at the appeal decision because, as members will know, I do have a concern that it's not just the building that causes impact on the openness of the green belt, but it's the residential paraphernalia around it, particularly in terms of what we've seen sometimes in terms of the private amenity space spreading out outside the site. Unfortunately, the inspector has already addressed the residential curtilage, and that is therefore not an option that we have to look at tonight. Therefore, I can't see any reason why we've got to refuse it. I have seen the condition number 12 in terms of the private garden amenity. I think that's probably sufficient because we can't actually put a condition to say that the residential amenity space cannot go outside the boundaries of the site. That is defined by the boundaries of the site. But just like Councillor Brady putting on record, I want to make very sure that the residential curtilage does not spread outside the boundaries of the site as shown on the site plan, because that is something that would have the potential to impact the openness of the green belt. But if we've got that, then I'll be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, anybody else at all? In which case it's time to vote on this, and the vote is to agree the officer's recommendation to grant the application. You want to vote now, if you agree with that, please?
13, Chair.
Any against? Abstentions?
One abstention.
Thank you. So that item is granted. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 10. This applications for EPF 1713/20, 12 to 14 Brickfield Road, Coopersale. And once again, it's Kuma who's taking this one.
Thank you, Chair. So the application bearing reference EPF/171320 is also a SAC held in abeyance case. This case has also been deferred to the committee's decision this evening, owing to objections from the Epping Town Council and 9 other non-councillor related residents. The objections are again summarised on pages 42 and 43 of the published agenda. Following the publication agenda, only one further comment from a neighbouring property has been received, which has requested as follows: that no deliveries take place during the restricted parking times advertised on street. They're the restrictions that have been put in place due to the school use nearby. They're 8 to 9:30 in the morning and 2:30 to 4 p.m. We've also requested that no construction traffic parks outside the front of 140 to 147 Parklands and 8A to 2 Brickfield Road, and also suggests that the developer could come to an arrangement with the cricket club for parking should they need it. Just simply to address these concerns, I mean, should members be minded to approve this application this evening, these concerns could be addressed through a construction, logistics or management plan secured via planning condition. In addition to this, additional email, we had a note from the Epping Town Council, again, just reinforcing their previous concerns, which have also been stated in the report. So moving on, the application site comprises a pair of semi-detached properties here. They're cottages, rather, located on the south side of Brickfield Road in Coopersale. The cottages would appear to date back to the early 20th century, and we shall see that in a second. Although neither have been statutory listed or local listed, nor are they within or adjacent to a conservation area. Just quickly picking out where the property is in relation. This is just a quick aerial of its surroundings. I mean, obviously it's predominantly residential in character, in terms of its surroundings, albeit you have a school to the rear boundary of the actual application site here. And you also have a cricket club on this side. These are the images. So here we go. This is the pair of cottages that are the subject of application for demolition and replacement for 4 dwellings. This again is obviously the pair of cottages that's sitting there for demolition, and a view looking eastwards. This is the junction between Brickfield Road and Coopersale Common, leading into development here. These are just typical housing types and styles in Brickfield Road. There's a couple of variations. They're basically dating 1970s, 80s, and some more modern, more recent additions to the development on this side of Brickfield Road. These are obviously the existing elevations to the for the cottages presently in place. So just repeating, the application is seeking planning permission to demolish and replace the pair of existing semi-detached cottages with 2 pairs of semi-detached dwelling houses which are in identical proportion and layout and constructed in brick and render. Parking spaces are provided to the front of these properties onto Brickfield Road. The main issues for consideration, the main issues for planning issues for consideration are set out on page 43, so I won't repeat those again. The principal demolition, I'll just quickly identify obviously the design of the elevations. As you can see, these are amended elevations that were requested by officers to just generally enhance and work and articulate some of the elevations. That obviously includes looking at, centralizing the porchway entrances, including some tiny, more, minor effects in terms of the roof, so I'm just trying to break it up. And these are the typical layouts themselves internally with section drawings. I'll come back. These are then also typical street or sketch views of the street scene from 2 different angles, northeast and southeast. Similarly again, southwest and northwest, and a 2D street scene sketch as well. The principle of demolition and replacement with 4 dwellings on previously developed land would comply with both national and local plan policies. Members will note that officers have taken into consideration the comments of the council's conservation officer, town council, and local neighbours, which in summary identify the existing cottages having the potential to be non-designated heritage asset and should therefore be considered in that regard. Whilst officers still remain sympathetic to these views, it is considered the amended scheme and the planning benefits to be achieved by granting permission would adequately outweigh these concerns. See page 44 of the actual published report. Therefore, demolition of dwellings and their replacement by 4 well-designed dwellings represents a positive outcome in planning terms. With respect to the site and general design, the new dwellings would respect the established forward building lines and height of buildings in the vicinity. The amended appearance of the dwellings are also considered to maintain the quality of housing development area and also be in keeping, if not enhance, the established character. Further details of external facing materials, including a revised landscape strategy, have been recommended by officers to ensure that the quality and standard development being proposed can be achieved. No amenities will not be harmed by these proposals given their siting and relative relationship and also their design. Matters relating to land contamination, flood risk and biodiversity have been addressed by the applicant's consultant team and therefore appropriately conditioned by officers to ensure the effects of development in each instance can be managed. Parking provision for each dwelling meets the recommendations, particularly in terms of quantum and design, as set out in the Essex parking standards. Officers note neighbour concerns relating to congestion in the vicinity of the application site and the surrounding roads, and those potential safety and the potential safety of highway users, particularly during school term hours, although it's not considered that the proposed development would exacerbate that situation. This view has also been supported by Essex Highways. With regards to the impacts on the SAC, the proposed development would be required to make a financial contribution towards both recreation and air pollution mitigation measures. Provision for EVCP, that's electric vehicle charging points, and home working are equally covered by planning conditions to further minimise the effects or impacts on the SAC. Overall, again, the application is recommended for approval, subject to planning conditions, indicated on pages 47 to 51, including securing a section 106 to secure the SAC-related financial contributions. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Keeler. Okay, on to the speakers now. We have Councillor Nigel Avey from Epping Town Council. Nigel, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry I could hardly hear the officer's presentation. The sound was so bad. It may be my fault because my hearing's bad, but equally I'll just go on what the report said rather than what he said. The Town Council's objection is really concerned with heritage. This view is shared by the Epping Society. I think the Conservation Officer is also concerned about a loss of a heritage asset. It is difficult, in my mind, to reconcile the loss of these distinctive properties and replace them with rather dull boxes. Therefore, in the Town Council's view, there will be a detrimental effect on the street scene. And it is a rather disturbing trend in Epping Forest District that we see lots of applications to demolish properties which could be renovated to be replaced with new buildings which, although built to modern standards, adds nothing to the local environment, which will suffer as a result. I ask the committee to support the Town Council and others, including residents, in rejecting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, over to members. Who would like to speak first? Sherry.
Thank you, Chairman. First, as an Epping Town Councillor, I was at that meeting, but I did come here tonight with an open mind to listen to the arguments and view the evidence and to be persuaded one way or the other. Whilst I appreciate the need for more housing, I have actually visited... Sorry, is that right?
Stop for a second.
Oh, sorry.
I or we or whoever, we missed off the applicant's agent, who's Mr. Rob Preston, who I understand is having problems with the microphone. It's resolved. It's resolved now. Okay, Mr. Preston, can you speak?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We can hear.
You can hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair and members. I'm speaking in support of the proposed development as the agent on behalf of the applicant. The officer's report confirms that the site is in the boundary of Coopersale and the principle of development is supported. Local plan policy H2A also states that the council will seek to deliver at least 70% of all new housing on brownfield sites such as this. No technical objections have been raised by statutory consultees in terms of highways, parking, drainage, contaminated land, ecology, or impacts on the Epping Forest SAC, with necessary conditions in Section 106 agreed. Coopersale Town Council have raised concerns regarding the loss of the existing building. The Conservation Officer indicated that the buildings could meet the criteria to be considered as a building of local importance, a statement which is not definitive. Nevertheless, we concur with the case officer that the existing building does not meet the three local policy criteria for a BLI. The criterion A is not met because the building has been altered significantly during its history by adding new windows and alternative fenestration. The replacement of the original timber barge boards and soffits with plastic material, and by adding a lean-to porch to number 12. The building does not meet criterion B, as it shows similarities to other 20th century buildings of this time, when settlements around Epping were expanding and building types and styles were becoming less local. Furthermore, the amended design of the proposed development successfully reflects the style of the existing building, with brick and render walls and details such as the gabled windows and front porches, meaning that it would preserve the street scene. Regarding criterion C, the existing dwellings have no special social significance. They were developed as part of the historical expansion of the settlement. Policy HC13A states that the local list is to be reviewed regularly and the building has not been considered for inclusion in the 18 years since this policy was adopted, nor since the objection was raised almost 2 years ago. The building does not therefore qualify as a BLI. Even if it did, the policy states that the maintenance of these buildings would be encouraged, but there is no statutory presumption in support of their preservation, unlike with listed buildings, for example, which carry much more weight. Furthermore, even if the building was locally listed, this would not remove the applicant's rights to demolish the building under Part 11 of the Permitted Development Order. Finally, there are several benefits which weigh strongly in favour of the proposed development. The proposals would deliver a net gain of 2 family homes to help to address the current shortfall in housing supply and without any expansion into the Greenbelt. And the presumption in favour of sustainable development is also applied in this case due to the land supply and delivery test position. It will involve the redevelopment of brownfield land, a policy priority, and it will make a more efficient use of the site by infilling spaces on either side at a density which is more consistent with the rest of the street. The current dwellings are poorly insulated, poorly laid out for modern living, and the proposed development will greatly improve energy efficiency, delivering both environmental benefits and improvements to quality and cost of living. In conclusion, I strongly endorse the case officer's recommendation of approval and respectfully request the support of the committee. Thank you very much.
Let's wind up. Thank you very much. Okay, Vice Chairman, do I have anybody else I've missed? No.
Again,
Okay, Councillor McCready, would you like to carry on when you left off? Sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And just to clarify, I haven't actually written a speech. I just wrote a few notes because when you get to 71 years of age, you forget things. So just to go back, I was a member of the Epping Town Council meeting when we spoke about this before, but I did come here tonight with an open mind to listen to the arguments, see the evidence, and to be persuaded one way or the other. And whilst I see we have a need for more housing, I did actually visit these cottages. It's a delightful, very old pair of cottages, which my understanding is they were actually built in 1895, not the early part of the 20th century. I don't know if that makes a difference, but there is a lot of history around these cottages. They are old, they are fairly dilapidated, they need some attention. But I think, for me, I'd be really sad for them to be taken down, because we lose our heritage and put in new modern developments, more modern houses. Going on to the next point about carbon footprint of the new homes, they're going to have a much better carbon footprint, but nobody's mentioned about the carbon footprint, how that's going to be affected by pulling down these old properties and just rebuilding with new bricks. I think carbon footprint speaks for itself. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Holly Whitburn.
Thank you, Chairman, and I agree with many of the comments from the Town Council and Councillor McCready. I think actually these are quite distinctive cottages and they do have character, and I note the Conservation Officer's comments around that. Also, in terms of the parking there, I think that's something that's not really been taken on board. There is a real parking issue around the school, which this is right next to. In fact, I've been working with Coopersell and Faden Garden School to try and get a safer parking scheme in. And I know there are many concerns, and as you come out onto the main road in Coopersell, there have been various issues with speeding as well, which we're trying to implement a highways panel scheme for at the moment. So I would have concern about the extra congestion that these extra buildings would have as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share the comments with regards to the very distinctive and character property. I think it would be an enormous shame if a property like this was to be demolished when I think it's clear that there is the option to refurbish and make more suitable. And I fundamentally believe that places like Epping, as London gets bigger, if we start to take down these buildings and set that precedent, then I think we will lose our heritage of these towns. And once they're gone, they're gone. There's no rebuilding them. And if I thought for a split second that an extra 2 homes here would mean there'd be 2 less built on the Greenbelt, then I might be more mindful to support. But I think we all know that's sadly not how it works. I don't think there's been any attempt really to make the properties in any way sympathetic to what was previously there. I appreciate, the front door's green, but, one can paint their front door once they've bought the property. I also don't share the fact that we're squeezing as many homes into this space as possible. I think a net gain of 2 homes when you're not losing heritage value and when you are doing it in a place where there is appropriate infrastructure in regards to Councillor Whitbread's point on parking. So I find it very difficult to support. However, I do wish to share my only concern. I'm minded not to support this application is, the likelihood of what condition we can put on our refusal to make sure that it's strong at a later appeal, because I fear that the sympathy of the buildings that are here at present would not be a strong enough reason to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I think we need to take the Conservation Officer's views seriously, although on their own, I don't think they're decisive. But I do think there are design issues here which haven't really been considered fully. Not so much with the design of the building itself, but with the setting in the streetscape. I mean, it's not the only example of where this happens, but it's particularly striking here because of its setting at the end of Brickfield Road. Because at the front of the house are dominated by parking, I mean, the effect, on the street scene and from looking at it is effectively of 4 houses marooned in a car park. And I see there's a landscaping condition, but if you actually look at the plan and landscaping, I mean, there's nothing to landscape in front of the houses. It's pretty much entirely hard surfacing. I mean, clearly there'd need to be some drainage issues there. But in terms of design, you look elsewhere in this particular bit of Brickfield Road, and indeed you look more generally where we've got good design, and parking tends to be at the side or the back of houses, rather than dominating the front of the garden and of the house. And certainly the rest of Brickfield Road in that area is enclosed by fences, and though we don't have that much control over means of enclosure, certainly in design terms, what we've got in front of us, I think doesn't meet the standards that we'd normally expect. And I think that's in conjunction with the other reasons given, makes me minded to refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor. Next speaker is Councillor Chris Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. My view is more balanced. Whilst I agree with much of what my colleagues have all said about the character of the properties, whether they be late Victorian or early Edwardian, I think a lot of it comes down into their current condition and their actual structural build. Because particularly if it's early Edwardian or later, it could very much be in this area that they are of what is named pot construction. But I doubt these are pot construction, but they could be. So it would be helpful to have some more information about the actual condition of the properties before they go in with the wrecking ball. Because actually, if they're in good order, the application could very much have been to add an additional property to the side of the properties to create a terrace, and could have been much more attractive by maintaining the original and enhancing with an additional dwelling on the plot. I agree with some of what Councillor Whitehouse said about the landscaping to the front of the properties, and I also take on board what my colleague said about the work that's been done by my county council colleague in that role around trying to get safer parking and safer speed limits for the school. In fact, I'm incredulous again that highways have failed to pick this up. They've been fully aware
of what's been going on, the speed surveys, the request for a 20's plenty in that location that Holly's been pushing very hard, and it's a real shame that none of these things have come through as part of this application from Highways. Therefore, tonight, I'm really in a balanced state. I'm neither convinced that this is a good application or unconvinced. I'm completely balanced on which way I would go on it. I don't believe a site visit would have been necessary, because I know all of us know the site really well. So I don't think that's the solution. But as it currently is, I am literally sitting on the fence, which is not my normal position.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. I may be a slightly strange voice in this one. I actually think that this is an application that we should be supporting. I've listened to various things that have been put forward in terms of parking at the front. Simply by looking at other dwellings on this side of Brickfield Road, there's already a lot of parking on the front of Brickfield Road. And in fact, just across the road, there's also parking. So I don't see that as a major consideration from a design point of view or even a street scene point of view here. I do agree with Councillor Whitbread that maybe a better approach would have been to have two additional dwellings on the either sides of the existing one, making a terrace rather than demolishing it, and that would help with the embedded carbon footprint. However, that's not what we have in front of us. The point around the potential for it being locally recognised, this application has been in play for quite a number of years. This isn't locally listed, therefore it's not getting over the barrier for that. I do think it is a nice cottage as it is, but I don't think that the proposed replacement is actually bad at all in terms of design, particularly compared to some of the other buildings closely around. So I actually think that on this one the officer has actually got it right, and that there isn't within this application sufficient to turn it down. That's not necessarily to say that it's a good one that we should definitely endorse as being a good exemplar of what we want to do. But I don't actually think that in terms of the application that there is enough for us to be taking it to refusal, and as such I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I speak as well?
Councillor Brady.
Write my own name down. Yes, I'm very familiar with this house. I used to actually know the people that lived in it. So I've actually been into the right-hand side of the house. And I couldn't envisage how you could possibly knock down a pair of semis and make two sets of semis. So I went and did my own site visit, and I was actually quite surprised how much space there was at the side of both of these buildings. So at the moment, you've got two fairly attractive cottages that were Gaines Park estate houses that are about 100 years old, made with local brick and local tiles, which does fit in and does look quite nice. But they've been rented estate cottages all the time, so they haven't been cared and loved for in the way that they might have been. So, yeah, I mean, inside as well, it's, as Councillor Whitbread said, talking about the condition, it could just have been the house I went in, I don't know. But certainly it wasn't really up to modern standards of living at all. They do look attractive. They've both got gardens at the front and little picket fences, and the parking was at the side. And the side parking made it much safer with that big school right beside these houses, so that the cars could come out forwards, as it were. Whereas I think you are going to get this set up. You've got 8 parking places there, and they'll all be probably reversing out into that road where the school children are around. So like the other councillors, half of it's sentimental, it's a shame if they go, but if you look at the housing on the other side of the road, that's not greatly attractive, the 70s, whatever style those were. Yes, there are some attractive ones on their side of the road, the side of this pair of houses, but it's a very difficult one to oppose. You could say it's over-intensification, you could say it's a detrimental effect on the street scene, but it is a brownfield site, and there's absolutely nothing. If we turn this down, there's absolutely nothing to stop the owner knocking them down as they stand. So again, I think I might just have to go on the side of listening to what the officers have said, but my heart really says the opposite, because they are part of the local area, part of the tradition with those bricks and those tiles, and it is a loss of history, but they're not protected. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Holy-Whitbury.
Thank you, Chairman. As I've said before, I'm minded not to support this application, but if members are minded to support it, I would like to try and put a condition in, I don't know if it's possible, around the applicant working with the school and North Essex Parking Partnership on both in relation to the safety scheme, the 20s Plenty scheme, and also the parking scheme that we're looking to put in place there, and make that a condition of approval.
Councillor, you're proposing that as a condition.
Yes, please.
Got a seconder for that? Seconded. Yes, sir.
Sorry, just before we take a vote on that, I think it would be very difficult to put that on as a condition, because we would be conditioning discussions with people that aren't the applicant. We'll be talking about works outside of the application site. We could put an informative on, suggesting that they do speak to them. Otherwise, we'd be talking about it. I mean, obviously, we would be seeking to have a legal agreement here because of the requirements for the FSAC. So we could put it in as a part of the legal agreement if we felt that strongly about it. Personally, I'd probably recommend an informative to suggest that the applicants do speak to Essex and liaise with them. But yeah, we could go down, but I wouldn't suggest a condition. I don't think it would be it would meet the tests for a condition.
Thank you, Graham. Can we take a step back then? Councillor Hawley, would you accept
Thank
an
you.
informative situation?
I would be looking for something stronger. I mean, I can't emphasise how concerned residents are around this issue and how concerned the school are. So I'd be looking for some stronger reassurances around it.
Okay, so Graham, what is something stronger than informative, but not the...
I'd say legal agreement. It would have.
It have to be the...
I would suggest in that case that it would have to be included in the legal agreement, and we would have it as part of that they have to liaise with Essex.
Okay, so we have Councillor Philip would like to say
Chairman,
a word.
while we're on conditions, we had on the previous application a condition around superfast broadband. Could we have that condition on these properties as well, please?
Any seconder for that one? Yep. Okay. And if we just deal with this one, can we, we've got two motions here which need voting on, I think. And Councillor Holly would like to come back.
This is a really small condition, but just in relation to the heritage side of it, I think keeping the green doors there to keep it in line with what has been there previously and a nod to the past would be a nice condition to put in place. And I know they're in the design anyway.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, yes, it is. It may prove difficult after many years to enforce that condition, but certainly for the next. Yeah, we can obviously material stuff like. And just quickly coming back on the broadband condition 11, it appears. As long as I'm in the right report, apologies. Let me just double check that. Condition 11, I think, is super fast broadband. That's not a problem. Not a problem.
Councillor Rolfe?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I just want to get this in before we go to the vote or anything. I feel like I'm being forced to abstain tonight on the simple grounds that I support what was said by the town councillor earlier on. I can't hear a word that the presenter is saying on there. It was appalling tonight. There's no other word for it. And I'm now forced to, because I just honestly could hear nothing. I can hear all of you sitting here without any problem, but I could not hear anything he said. And if we come into a meeting, I do think the least that can happen is the personnel office, the the officers do attend the meeting in the same way we're expected to. I think it's disgraceful, the behaviour, and we're not doing our residents a good service any way, shape or form. Thank you. I shall abstain, but if it continues like this, you'll have to excuse me because I shall leave the meeting.
Councillor, I totally agree with you on this. What I've written down here, the sound coming over Zoom, and I can hear it, but it's not distinct. And I think we're putting ourselves in danger by carrying on in a situation where we can't really hear what's happening. We could be accused of actually not grasping the whole of the meanings and etc. because of this. So I don't know who to ask on this. We've been asked for a long time, but we need to have better sound acoustics in this place because it's getting very, very bad. Laura, did you want to say something?
Chairman, at the risk of taking us off down a rat hole, you'll remember in the budget that I brought forward in February, there is funds allocated for renovation of the audio and visual and sound, particularly hearing loop within this building. That is something that takes time because it is a listed part of the structure. It's something that we do recognise. I have to say, personally, I have not found a problem in hearing the officer speaking in his presentation. I have found it perfectly clear. Maybe it's the position I'm in.
You have better ears than I have, then. A lot better.
Chairman,
Laura. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I was going to mention that, but actually I have got a copy of what the applicant's agent said that I can read for those people who did struggle to hear. I appreciate that it's out of order and that you've already discussed, but if you want me to do that, Chair, I can do that.
Does anybody want to hear the Laura read the items out?
Read the applicant's agent.
Councillor Rolfe does, so if you could do that. Okay. Right, well, I mean, I know that there was a working party being started about 3 or 4 months ago regarding the sound here, and I volunteered to go on it as one who has trouble with hearing sometimes, and nothing's happened. I don't know what's happened about it. I shall trace. Is it happening?
It's happening, Chairman, but it takes time because it's a listed building and it is very difficult to actually refurbish the microphones and visual. I wish it wasn't listed. I'd be a lot happier. And we'd all be a lot better off.
Councillor McIver.
Not wishing to overlabour this point as we have a constructive meeting going on, but perhaps in the interim until the technology is sorted, it should just be compulsory that members and officers and other attendees are here in person how it was pre-COVID.
Yep, I totally agree with that. In all meetings, in fact. But, there you go. Can we get back to this meeting now? And we had two conditions which were fast fading in the past. And I think we still have one from Councillor Phillip.
No, Chairman, the only one remaining, I think, is Councillor Whitbread's suggestion that we add the parking stuff into the legal agreement.
Okay. So, Councillor Whitbread's.
But we ought to hear perhaps Laura's reading it out. We don't
It doesn't need it. No. Okay, so we... okay. We had a seconder for Councillor Whitbread, I believe. Somebody. Right. And you have the words, and you can put that in the legal agreement? Yep. Okay, so we now would like to vote on this. So the condition, those in favour?
No, I was going to say.
13-4.
Those against? Those abstaining?
One abstention.
One abstention over the back there, Councillor Rolfe. Thank you very much. So, unless anybody else has got anything to say, we come to the vote on this, which is to agree with the officer's recommendation that this should be granted. Those in favour, please vote now. Those against?
3.
Abstaining?
1.
Okay, thank you very much. That means that application has been granted with conditions. Let's move on. Okay, the next one is EPF 0726/22 Magnolia House, Abridge Road, Baden Boys. And that is Graham, I think you're taking that? Or is it?
It is me. I've just realised, apologies, I'm not actually on the Zoom call. Give me 2 seconds. That's my fault. I didn't set it up. Yeah. Just trying to find it. Apologies, just give me 2 seconds. I would normally have this all set up before we started the meeting, but I completely forgot since I wasn't presenting the first 2 items. So I will be with you momentarily. Apologies for that. So even when we're in the office, it's not a seamless process, unfortunately. So thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your patience there. So this application relates to the construction of a pond and associated landscaping and drainage works at land to the west of Magnolia House. The application is before members due to an objection from the Parish Council, who are registered to speak. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The application site is a parcel of land to the west of the historic farmyard and benefits from separate access from the nearby residential properties. So these here are the residential properties, and this here is the access to the site. The site is situated close to the M11, which can be seen just here, and it is wholly within the green belt. The site was originally part of the wider Fadenhall Farm complex. The adjacent land uses include lawful commercial storage and residential dwellings. The proposal is for a pond to be created roughly in this location. The pond is stated as providing a sustainable drainage system for the access road. This is claimed to be the most favourable location for these works. The proposed pond would constitute an engineering operation. Paragraph 150 of the MPPF states that such works are not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, provided that they preserve its openness and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. Whilst concerns have been raised regarding the need for the pond, this is not a material consideration for such operations, nor is any weight given to the potential alternative locations for this. The only consideration is the impact on openness and the purposes of the Greenbelt. So cross-section of the pond. The proposed pond would have graded banks to a maximum depth of 3 metres, although the anticipated permanent water depth would be around 1.5 metres. The pond would be landscaped to create a natural appearance to the development. Whilst the case for the pond to serve the access road is not particularly convincing, the works are nonetheless not inappropriate development within the Greenbelt, would not harm the openness of the Greenbelt, and would have some ecological benefit. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to condition. Back to you, members.
Thank you very much, Graham. Okay, we have speakers on this one. First one being Councillor Gooch from Baden Boys Parish Council. Peter, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman, members. This site has a long and some might say problematical history. The track to which this pond relates was actually refused by this committee and overturned on appeal. One of the reasons was that the planning inspector recognised that there was already an existing track across this agricultural field and felt that the road wouldn't be any worse off. So there is a history of this track, and interestingly, there's been no history of drainage concerns whatsoever. In fact, at the time, the applicant's own agent said a permanent construction is proposed. The access way would consist of a plastic cellular construction topped with a gravel or shingle. This would enable water falling onto the surface of the track to percolate into the ground as it does now, indicating that it previously done with no problems. We're now faced with this pond, which is a considerable distance away from this track and is going to be piped from this road into this area. You can understand perhaps why the parish council are somewhat sceptical over this application and what may well be the true aim of this applicant further down the line. It's well known that this applicant wishes to redevelop this site in the Green Belt. The parish council's view is that this should be deemed a harmful development in the Green Belt. The scale of it just doesn't ring true in terms of the drainage. It'd be very interesting to monitor what drainage water actually reaches this pond. We don't think it's justified. We don't agree with the officer, and we feel that this should be deemed as a development in the Green Belt, where rather than engineering, and therefore there's no very special circumstances to justify it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Now we have the applicant's agent, Mr. Steve Hayhurst, via Zoom.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me? That's a nod. Could someone say yes?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to enter into discussion about the allegations by the parish council, which we completely refute. This is a simple proposal to overcome a drainage problem related to an access road across the applicant's land. At the same time, it will introduce an attractive landscape feature which will enhance biodiversity. The access road was allowed on appeal in 2017. A start has been made. The road is to be completed as approved, but the applicant's engineers advised that because of the local geology, the adjacent ground has low permeability, and they therefore advised that surface water runoff would gravitate towards the low point of the site where it would naturally pool. The proposal aims to formalise this by directing surface water to this low point and forming a pond to receive it, thereby creating a sustainable drainage feature that would have visual amenity and ecology benefits that would not otherwise arise. In planning law, the proposal should be defined as engineering operation, and as there would be no above ground construction, it should be classed under the NPPF and the local plan as an appropriate development in the Greenbelt. This was the same issue which led the council to refuse the original application for the access road, and which was overturned by an appeal inspector. A landscape master plan is submitted with the application. It shows that 16 native trees would be planted, along with 38 native shrubs and 1,320 pond plants. This is not a situation where the applicant is required to demonstrate a special case for the development, as it is an appropriate greenbelt development. But the attractive appearance of the landscape pond and its biodiversity benefits are surely something to be welcomed. Subject to the safeguards contained in the recommended conditions, I therefore request you that you support this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go, Laura's said, would anybody like her to read that out if they had trouble in hearing it? Yes, Councillor Rolfe would like that. Thank you.
Statement by Stephen Hayhurst. This is a simple proposal to overcome a drainage problem related to an access road across the applicant's land. At the same time, it will introduce an attractive landscape feature which will enhance biodiversity. The access road was allowed on appeal in 2017 and a start has been made. The road is to be completed as approved, but the applicant's engineers advise that because of the local geology, the adjacent ground has low permeability and they therefore advise that the surface water runoff would gravitate towards the low point of the site where it would naturally pool. The proposal aims to formalise this by directing surface water to this low point and forming a pond to receive it, thereby creating a sustainable drainage feature that would have visual amenity and ecology benefits that would not otherwise arise. In planning law, the proposal should be defined as an engineering operation and, as there would be no above-ground construction, it should not be classed under the NPPF and local plan as an appropriate development in the Green Belt. You may recall that this was the issue which led to the Council's refusal of the original access road application, which was overturned by the inspector on appeal. A landscape master plan was submitted with the application. This shows that 16 native trees would be planted, along with 38 native shrubs and 1,320 pond plants. This is not a situation where the applicant is required to demonstrate a special case for the development, as it is an appropriate greenbelt development, but the attractive appearance of the landscaped pond and its biodiversity benefits are surely something to be welcomed. Subject to the safeguards contained in the recommended conditions, I therefore request that you support this application.
Thank you. Right, members, who would like to speak first? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think given the number of applications that have come forward for this site in the time that I've been sitting on this committee, it has a lengthy history. I do remember what the Parish Council was talking about in terms of the application for the roadway, which was supposed to be permeable in the same way that the field currently is. Therefore, I think the suggested reason for taking the runoff is tenuous at best. That said, we have an application for a pond in the Greenbelt, and a pond in the Greenbelt is not unreasonable, it has to be said. Although given the particular location of this pond, why there's the concern about visual amenity, I'm not entirely sure, because nobody's really going to see it there. So why are we making this attractive? So I think there is a challenge around why the applicant might actually want to do this, but the planning application is in front of us. I do have a concern that we probably need to add a condition to make sure that it's used purely as a natural pond. I wouldn't want, for example, to see recreational activities happening on it, perhaps fishing or something else that would increase the number of people travelling across that track. So if we can get a condition on to restrict the usage of the pond, I think that's probably about as good as we can do. I think I have to set aside the idea of it draining off the road, because that's not pertinent to what we're faced with discussing here. We're looking at a pond in Greenbelt, and much as I have my doubts about why it's being done, the application as it sits in front of us, I can't see a reason for refusing.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you going to propose that then as an amendment?
I'd like to propose that as a condition, yes.
Any seconder for that? 3 seconders. Can we vote on that? Thank you. Okay, next speaker is Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that I'm a member of the Thaden Boyce Parish Council Planning Committee, but as I always declare at the beginning of those meetings, anything that comes here, I judge here by the arguments that we hear tonight, and I'm not in any way beholden to the Thaden Boyce Parish Council. I do agree with Councillor Phillip that it's very much a balance, but a pond in the green belt is difficult to resist. But the idea of the conditions to make sure that it is not used for recreational purposes, which we have just voted for, I would support. And I think possibly it would be difficult to put forward an argument to resist the pond, although I have some doubts, like Councillor Phillip, as to the reason for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. The biodiversity argument has been raised and is mentioned as one of the relevant policies in the report, but there's actually not that much about how that biodiversity value is going to be sustained. I mean, I note there's conditions that it must be constructed in accordance with plans, but I don't see anything about the sort of ongoing management of the pond for biodiversity value, other than if anything dies within 5 years, it's got to be replanted. I just wondered what sort of assurance you can give us on that and why that's not covered in conditions.
Sorry.
No, that's right. Well, no, that is the. You're correct. That's the only condition we've put on about any landscaping that dies within 5 years should be replaced. I mean, obviously, the act of installing that landscaping and the pond itself will obviously have some benefit, ecological benefit. We know that this will attract wildlife and will assist in the ecology. I mean, we could condition add an additional condition about the ecological benefits, but I'm not entirely sure what we could put over and above what we've already got in the landscape condition. But I mean, obviously, if you feel that we could add a condition, if you feel that there is a condition that could be added that covers that, obviously that could be put forward, and I'm sure we could add that on.
Well, I mean, I suppose, you know, what I've got in mind, I mean, ponds don't, I mean, they've got some biodiversity value, but, I mean, there are plenty of sterile and low ecological value ponds, you know, in various corners of the district. I mean, quite often they do need a certain amount of management to retain their value. I mean, I would have assumed that if it was, you know, sort of, one of the purposes of this was to maintain biodiversity. We do have policies about increasing that biodiversity, not just defending it. You know, there'd be some sort of management plan or similar, you know, agreed with our ecologists or country care in order to ensure it met those objectives.
Yes, certainly I don't see why that would be an issue, adding a condition about ecological management and maintenance and having something agreed for that. Yeah, that would be a perfectly suitable condition if you wish to add that.
Well, I'm happy to put that forward for members to agree or not.
Okay, you wish to add that. Seconder, please. Seconder. Fine. All those in favour of that amendment?
Unanimous, Chair.
Chairman, while we're on conditions, could I possibly put forward a possible third condition, which is if the pond becomes unused and therefore drained, that the ground has to be restored to its original greenbelt condition, so that if this pond stops being of any use, we put the ground back to how it was before.
Are you saying it stops under natural conditions and dries out like with the drought, or they purposely?
If it's allowed to go into disrepair so that it leaks and it becomes dry, so we don't have an engineered place left in the green belt. It's restored to its original green capability rather than being left as an eyesore.
Okay, does anybody like to second that? Anybody like to vote on it? So, good. Our third condition then.
That was unanimous.
Apologies, just before we go on, can I just confirm then, so the reasoning behind that is visual amenity, is it?
Absolutely, visual amenity and protection of the green belt.
Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not entirely convinced by the engineering requirements here, but we have given permission in the past for some very substantial ponds in privately owned ground, and I can't see from that point of view that there's any difference between this one and the others that we've given permission for previously. So ignoring the engineering side, the pond I think we cannot object to, so I will be supporting it.
Does make me wonder whether any pond that comes up in the future will have to go through the same conditions, which looks like it will, won't it? Which probably isn't a bad thing, but okay.
Each application is determined on its own merits, Chairman.
Well, we have apparently have speakers, unless anybody wants to say anything. So we come to the vote.
Unanimous, Chair. That was unanimous for, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is granted. We move on to item 12, which is 94 Cooperstown Common, EPF 1015/22. And that is Graham, you again?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the extension and conversion of the existing garage at 94 Cooperstown Common into ancillary accommodation. The application is before committee as there's an objection from the Parish Council who have registered to speak. No neighbours have objected. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. The site is situated within the village of Cooperstown. It is not within the Greenbelt or a conservation area. This dwelling and 4 of its neighbours are served by shared access and are located behind an established hedge. That's just here. That's the hedge. This application is a revised scheme following a previous refusal. The previous application was only refused due to the proposed zinc roof. This has been altered and a clay tile roof is now being proposed. The garage is situated to the front of the site and is linked to the main dwelling by a small connecting roof. As previously mentioned, the site is situated behind an established hedge that can be seen here. The existing garage mirrors that at number 86. Other outbuildings to the front of properties can also be seen within the surrounding area. This particular collection of housing is a mix of red brick and rendered properties, all with clay tile roofs. Due to the presence of the hedge, the only particularly visible part of the existing garage is the roof. The proposal would enlarge the length of the existing garage by 2.4 metres and would replace the connecting roof with an enclosed lobby area. The overall height of the building would not increase. However, the eaves height would be raised by 750 millimetres. A small dormer and roof lights would be installed in the roof, and glazing would be added to the front of the building, giving the building a 2-storey appearance. The enlarged garage is proposed to be rendered similar to nearby neighbouring properties. Given the existing hedge, and since the overall height of the building would not be increased, the impact from the proposal would be minimal, Conditions have been suggested restricting the use of the accommodation and to ensure the retention of the existing hedge. Subject to these, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and therefore is recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Graham. We have one speaker on this. It's Councillor Avey. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. The Town Council, I think, agree with the new plans for change of the roof materials, which is good, which conform to the rest of the street scene. However, I think the Town Council still considers the proposal constitutes overdevelopment of the site in terms of size and bulk, which have a negative impact on the street scene and character of the area. It's open to the committee to consider the impact of the emerging local plan and whether this application meets the test set out in policy DM9. I would say one of the other things the Town Council would ask for, if you are minded to agree with this application, allow it, is that there is a condition placed on it that it isn't sold off as a separate dwelling from the main building. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers? No. Okay, members, who would like to speak first?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I actually think it's quite a good design from a planning application point of view. And I would say that the Town Council's point is actually covered by condition number 4, which I strongly agree with, but I will be supporting the application.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep. Oh, Councillor Philip again.
Yeah, Chairman, it's a question actually. With the garage being converted into ancillary accommodation and being extended forward by that 2-point-something metres, is there still sufficient car parking on the site?
Yes, there is. I'm just going to very quickly put up the photograph taken from the front of the site. So you can see, I mean, there is a car currently parked on a bit of green verge there, but you can see here, this is the parking area to the front of the garage. Obviously, this would come forward, but even so, you can see there is actually quite a lot of space there. There's certainly space for at least 2 cars to be parked next to each other, and there would certainly be space lengthwise for a car to be parked, even with the extension.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment at all? If that's nobody, then I think we'll possibly go to a vote now to agree the officer's recommendation to grant permission on this. Those in favour, please vote.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So that application is granted. So now we move on to item 13, which is EPF 1203/22, 13 Dukes Avenue, Aidan Boys. You then, Graham?
Yeah, again. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the retention of decorative railings at first floor level at 13 Dukes Avenue. The application is before committee since there has been an objection from the parish council and a neighbouring resident. It is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The application site is a former bungalow that has been extensively extended and is now a 2-storey dwelling with rooms in the roof. It benefits from a large flat-roofed rear addition, which can be seen here. Consent is being sought to retain the 900mm black metal railings around the edge of the existing flat roof. This application follows an enforcement investigation. There is no access to the flat-roofed area nor is any proposed. This shows views of the railings from the neighbouring site. These are some further views from the neighbouring property and a couple more from the neighbours. So the main concerns raised are regarding the need for the railings and the potential use of the flat roof as a roof terrace. The concerns raised are appreciated, and it is agreed that use of this area as a roof terrace would likely cause significant harm to the neighbours. There is also really no justification for the railings, in fairness. However, the application is not for the use of this roof as a terrace. There is no access shown to this area, and when the enforcement officer visited the site, there was no evidence of any access being created. A condition has been suggested, specifically restricting the use of the flat roof as a roof terrace, and as such, the only consideration here is the impact from the railings themselves. Whilst it is unusual to have decorative railings atop a roof that isn't used as a roof terrace, these railings are just 900mm high, are open in character, and are black painted metal. They are not visible within the street scene, and whilst they are visible from neighbouring properties, they don't have any significant visual impact. The application is solely for the retention of the decorative railings. As I said, there is no evidence to suggest that the roof would be used as a terrace, and a condition is recommended to prevent such use. The railings themselves, whilst an unusual feature, would not cause excessive harm in terms of visual impact or loss of amenity. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Graham. We have one objector, Helen Gooding. Thank you, Helen. If you turn your microphone on, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. We believe the railings have already substantially harmed the visual amenity of our property. As you can see from the pictures, they're particularly visible from our ground and first floor bedrooms, our lounge, our dining area and our patio. It wasn't particularly obvious from the photos, but due to the slope of Dukes Avenue, the first floor of 13 Dukes Avenue starts at a level halfway up the first floor of our property. And this difference in property levels results in the almost 1 metre high, 5.5 metre of railings running parallel to our property, having a visually intrusive and imposing presence on our property. And you couldn't quite get that from the pictures, I don't think. Whilst a retrospective planning application that was submitted after roof works were interrupted by planning enforcement action refers to these as decorative railings, we believe that their presence provides a means for a change of use to the first floor flat roof as an outdoor living or recreation space, and anyone on this roof would look directly into our bedroom windows, etc. Claiming these railings to be purely decorative is, in our opinion, disingenuous, and we don't believe the lack of a door at this point to this large enclosed rooftop area demonstrates that they've been installed for purely decorative purposes. The 2 windows have got large casements and they already allow fairly easy access to the area, as demonstrated by the previous occupants of the property who often went out onto their roof. Given the ease of access to the roof, due both to the size of the window and the height of the roof being above first floor level, we would argue that the noise and disturbance could become an issue, as well as increased loss of privacy. The future use of the rooftop space is surely a material consideration and should not be dismissed as speculation. We infer from the facts of an installation of this type of metal railing around the perimeter of a flat-roofed building the intention to make use of the flat roof area now or in the future. The planning officer's report is recommending accepting the proposal with a condition to prevent the use of the roof area for amenity purposes. However, if the railings are allowed to stay, it's difficult to imagine how such a condition could be either policed or enforced. We also believe, if approved, this addition of railings would set an unwanted precedent. There's nothing like this, they're not in keeping with the surrounding area at all. The response given that they're not visible from the highway, street scene or wider area appears to miss our point. which is that others with a flat roof also seek to enclose and or embellish them in ways not in keeping with developments in the village. And we think that the visual amenity that we've suffered is actually quite a big thing.
Thank you very much. We have another speaker, which is Councillor Gooch from Thaden Boys Parish Council. Peter, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. The Parish Council wholeheartedly supports the neighbour in this instance. We think these railings are visually intrusive. As the previous speaker said, the difference in the topology of Duke's Avenue, and you look up high, these will be visually intrusive, as I said. I'll take the point of the condition. However, the issue with condition is over the last 16 months in Thaden Boys alone, I could provide a long list of applications where conditions have been applied and all of them have been ignored. Last time I spoke to Jerry Godden, before he left the council, there was over 400 enforcement notices out, and I'm afraid people's attitude these days are, we'll try it and see if we get away with it, I'm afraid. We can't believe these have been put up purely for decorative purposes. There must have been some ulterior motive, and quite clearly that would be to use the terrace. What happens if next time or next month, whatever, we suddenly see 2 plant plots out there on top of that roof? Are they going to be decorative? What if they want to, say, a couple of times a week come out, you know, the windows changed, easier access? How's that going to be policed? All this is doing, I think, is setting up potential conflict between the neighbours. Are we really going to allow people, first floor extensions, to put decorative railings up? This can't be allowed, and hopefully you'll refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Who's first? Okay, Councillor Whitebread. Whitebread. Whitebread.
Chairman, thank you. I've listened very carefully to what both the objector and the Parish Council said in this, and I have very great sympathy with what they say, but do recognise, as the officer has said in the report, that we cannot work on the basis of what might be done and what might be done against conditions. However, I do think this is a terrible proposal and is something that we definitely think doesn't fit with what's going on. And as such, I would actually like to propose that we refuse this application on the basis of policy DM10, subsection E. Subsection E says, extensions or alterations to residential buildings will be required to respect and or complement the form, setting, period and detailing of original buildings. I think very clearly what we have here does not complement or respect the existing buildings around or the setting, and as such it's against policy, and if it's against policy we should refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm happy to support and second Councillor Phillips' proposal. I think when you see these type of applications, you realise where things go wrong. And I agree with what the Parish Council said around enforcement on these type of issues. There are too many times when, because of the enforcement process that exists in this country, people are able to abuse that situation. I'm not saying it would happen in this case, but really railings on a first floor flat roof with windows opening up to it, would we have passed that ourselves in the first instance? No, we wouldn't. We would never have agreed to that if it was an original planning application. Really, those windows should be fixed with just the skylights opening. I know the argument will be that they're a fire escape, but actually, if it did go through, it should be fixed. It shouldn't be able to be open so people can go on that roof. And of course, I agree with the neighbour, because the neighbour will now have to explain that to people if ever asked as to, is that balcony used? Because if it's got railings around it, it's a flat roof, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to support Councillor Phillip in his recommendation for refusal, and I'd urge other members to do likewise.
Before I take that further, Councillor Amos, something to say?
Thank you, Chairman. What I was about to say, both Councillor Phillip and Councillor Whitbread have said. I see no justification in supporting this for the reasons that have already been enunciated, and I certainly fully support rejecting this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip, are you going to put a motion forward to the reject?
Absolutely. I propose that we refuse this application on the grounds of policy DM10 subsection E.
DM10 subsection C and Councillor... Sorry? Okay, halfway through that, Councillor McIver puts his hand up. Would you like to say something? Okay. Okay, so you're seconding this one. So we come to a vote now to agree that proposal or not. Those in favour? Refusing, but accepting what you said. Yes, exactly.
Unanimous, Chair.
Okay, so that seems to have been rejected on the grounds of Councillor Phillip put forward. Thank you very much. Okay, now the next item is exclusion of public press. I don't think there's anything there. So therefore I close the meeting at 8:35.